spent 18 years in Teleo System. He's married Teleo Systems. He's married to Amanda and has 4 kids. He's also won some hackathons. So without further ado, Erwin, are you there?
Yeah, you guys hear me fine?
Okay, all right, welcome. Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Welcome back, Erwin. Can you tell us
Hey,
a bit about your talk today?
sure. So, sorry for the vague title, but you will see in the presentation what I was trying to do, which is kind of take a look at developer leadership. I've actually been in that role for a few years now, so I'm kind of at the point of, have you learned anything? What have you learned? And I think the big thing is, for what I think I have learned, it's really underestimated as a critical piece in developer growth and business success, especially in our neck of the woods. So I'm hopefully going to use one brief story about it that will kind of bring out what I saw very early on, what I experienced early on. I didn't realize what was happening until much later, and probably ask us if we are. I suspect for most of us in the room, or most of us watching this, we have similar experiences of someone giving us a ramp. Meaning, the reason you are a successful developer, and I count everyone in the room, as successful. I'm glad my son just came. I have 2 of them with me right now. So if you hear noises, it's them. Yeah, I suspect everyone in the room who I think is successful had some form of effective leadership around them. And for those who aren't in the room, or who aren't even in the dev space anymore, I think it's because of a lack of leadership. So maybe we'll see if my summaries are correct. And if not, it's kind of entertaining, so hopefully we'll be entertained anyway. Yeah?
Okay, so without further ado, you can take it away.
I'm going to present my screen. Please let me know if you're seeing it fine, right? Screen 2. Should be seeing the same slide introducing me from before. Yeah? I think it's up. Looks like it's up. Let me advance it.
Am I off?
Right. Nice. If you are looking at my screen, notice we have no agenda and thing. We'll figure that out as we go along. But you should be seeing what looks like a very retro scene. Too much afros. ChatGPT doesn't quite know what an Afro-Caribbean is, so sorry. But they tried. The characters may look consistent throughout, but they're certainly going to change as we go on. But even as you look at this scene, and Nicholas, let me know if we could do this interactively or not. But as you look at this scene, what do we think is going on here? Right, I can't hear you, so I'm not going to wait too long in case there's challenges giving me feedback. But
Can you hear me now?
yes, I'm hearing you fine.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so we have our speaker mic able. Can you just repeat the question?
Sure. What do you think is going on here? As you look at this scene, if you had to describe, ask my daughter what's going on, and she had a really funny response. But what do you think is happening here? And this is based on true story stuff, so I'll tell you what the true story is right after.
It looks like a detective office.
My daughter said the same thing. She was like, it looks like a detective. I was extremely disappointed in me, but you guys are on point.
It be on point? Okay, so who in trouble, him or her? Because she looked like she's sitting down at her desk. And the
That's
person
the question. That's the question. Who's in trouble here? So he walks into the office and she asks him, why do you have that look on your face? Now, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to compress his story a lot. As we go forward, this is a few days before. Notice the characters are slightly different because I'm not that good at image generation and ChatGPT yet. Nevertheless, they're the same characters, maybe brighter and happier. This is 2 days before. So if you go back, we know that he walked into her office. Incidentally, she is his boss. Her name is Gail. He walks into the office looking like it's the end of the world. But 2 days before, clearly things were not like that. People were having a happy time. And then this happened. What do we think happened here?
Well, some funny stuff going on with ChatGPT. I'm assuming it's trying to illustrate what he's seen on the screen, but something's
Yes.
going on with the code.
Yeah, that's okay. But let's pretend ChatGPT is not too horrible.
Something's broken or some revelation.
I like the something's broken. I like that direction. So this, as I said, this is kind of based on a true story. And the elements of the story is related to what happened here. He goes back to, so when he went to Gail at first, in the first slide, he was going to relate to her what happened an hour ago, which was, and let me come to her response in a little while, which was, and this happened for real, the developer in the story was building a system that was due the next day. He spent 2 weeks building it. So you could have seen in the previous slide, you could have seen here, up to 2 days ago, he was having a good time. And literally, moments later, well, not moments, but a day or so later, he does something that destroys the system. And by destroy, for real, what happened, this story is based about 17, 18 years ago. And this particular gentleman was working on something called virtual PC, and he had never used it before. So what he did is he finished his work, 2 weeks of exploration and figuring things out, and he was kind of ready to go. His boss, Gail, is going off to present this to clients in another country. And just he's about to wrap up and put it on some kind of storage media. He doesn't know, so he sees an ellipsis and he clicks it and it says close, and he closes it. And then he loses everything. He loses all the work he had done over the last 2 weeks to bring the system to where it was at. And that's how we started the story, with him saying, with her looking at his face saying, oh, why the other look on your face? So we're all following. Even before I go on, anybody have a similar story like that in their lives at all? You don't need to say what it is, but if you could maybe indicate to Nicholas, put your hands up if you've gone through a challenge like something similar to this.
Yeah, we see in a hand.
I'll take that one hand and make it representative to many developers would have gone through this.
In two hands. All right.
Either delete the work, you lost the code base, you overwrite something, you dropped a production database, that's a popular one. Yeah. Something that's very, very critical happened, and you were the one responsible. There was no shirking the responsibility. So you went to your boss and said, boss man, this thing happened. Now, if you could try to describe what you think is happening in this slide. Remember Gail, this character, Gail is his manager.
She's probably upset after finding out that the entire program is lost.
Right, fair enough. Fair enough. Now, what your AI artist, Erwin, tried to do was give you two perspectives in one, which is, so the developer is only seeing up to the second panel, right? He's only seeing her emote, and to be honest, she isn't emoting a lot. When I talk to my daughter about it, she actually has it's very cute. She's in primary school, so she has one of those feelings charts, and there are like 9 feelings on it, from happiness to happiness, sadness, embarrassment, that kind of a thing. She couldn't identify what that feeling was. I just called it a quiet repose. Like she doesn't actually look angry. She doesn't look frustrated. She just looks like she's holding it together. But inside, there is that deep anger. There's that, what do you mean you lose it? Where's this? What's really going on? That's the feeling she has. And so now, for me as a leader, I could identify why this jumped out at me as I kind of prompted it into existence, and I found it was bang on, because quite often you find yourself in a place where, as a leader, you're getting information, you're getting feedback about what's going on, and it's not healthy for you to say exactly what's on your mind at the time in terms of feelings. You need to kind of take a beat. So I think I try to represent Gail doing this here. So developer is seeing quiet, repose Gail on one side, and she's feeling a storm on the inside. What do you think is going on here? If you had to guess what Gail is saying to the developer, what do you think it is?
Maybe she's saying it's okay. We have a very healthy organization culture, and these mistakes happen.
All right. All right. What else we think Gail is saying?
This is how you save your work. Try it again.
No, I like those 2 points in particular. They're very positive and hopeful. No one is saying Gail is telling him, listen, fix this or go home. Nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying home time. She doesn't look like she's breathing down his neck. She actually looks like she's saying something like this. What do you need? Now, going back to real life, in the real story, this is based on. Okay. In the real story, this is based on. This almost exactly happened. My manager said to me, because I was the developer in the story, well, what do you need? Everything else is true. Manager needed to go off, leave the country the next day to present the work. Yes, 2 weeks of work was lost because of a bad keystroke, because of a bad choice by me. But the question was, what do you need? Because I had communicated to him, maybe I could fix it. So Gail is asking, what do you need? And then moving on, here was Gail calling home. I'll be home late. You have a problem to fix. And then, of course, moving on to the story, just to advance things. Developers working on it. And the feeling he had was, I could do this. So again, pointing to real life, that this maps pretty well to what happened in the moment for me. Said to my manager, I lost the work. My manager said, all right, took a beat. I didn't get shouted at. I didn't get ball up at. I didn't get read a bill of rights. I didn't get all the things that could be feelings that are legitimate to occur here. Instead, I got something very similar to what do you need? And then we pressed on through the night. I'll tell you how it concluded at the end. But in a minute, if you were a developer, maybe you felt like this, shocked because you do that nonsense, and then desperate. Can you turn back time? I'm sure some of us have had that feeling in the past. I wish I could go back in time and take back what I did or what I said. And then, of course, you get angry with yourself. And I'm going to go through the 5 stages of acceptance. But then, depending on the kind of manager you may have had, you may have felt thankful and empowered. And then aware, of course, of there may be something else you could do. And the manager would have had similar feelings, shock, desperation, anger. But move that into being buoyant, and then into being steady, and then being optimistic. That would have led to that slide, I think, of this developer sitting down with a manager looking on hopefully, as opposed to other kinds of scenarios that could have played out. So as I said, these are just, I'm looking back at that story and essentially using the last few years of my occupying a position of leadership to create a sort of a lens to understand how impactful that thing was. This was, as I said, 17, 18 years ago. I was just starting off in my career. Depending on how my manager responded, I could have found myself really questioning the point of the career, the point of the industry, the point of my being there. Clearly, it was a massive failure. What should I be doing? But because I had a manager who was, he never expressed the anger to me, but let's assume he was, because that's reasonable. What instead I got was elevated ship, a steady word, and the sense that, yeah, maybe you could do it over. I want to pivot a little bit to actually talk about leadership, because I realized in doing this, it made sense to kind of see what what is being said about leadership in our field. This is agile leadership specifically, or software development leadership. And to be honest, it's not really the card many people draw for. They draw for talent a lot. Oh, the 10x developer. I can tell you with certainty, I have never been a 10x developer. I've worked with a couple over the years. They're amazing people. But a lot of our industry tends to focus on developer skill, developer quality, developer excellence. But not a lot is really said about leadership, especially in our neck of the woods in the region. In fact, as you look at the careers, maybe a lot of us know an IT manager, someone who has some network management skills. But then I don't know a lot of actual career-oriented software leaders in the industry. I think most of them are in the room, or most of them, we all know each other. It's not a lot. And that lack, I think, plays a key role in how the industry develops. In fact, effective leadership looks like this. I've seen this in my career. It's like when I was doing some research and looking at this particular paper, it said this. And I was like, for sure that I remember how it was for that particular project. I was essentially given the VM and given the technology and said, okay, go off. What can you do with this? And I spent two weeks figuring it out. And of course, I had a lot of freedom to do what needed to get done. It wasn't somebody kind of holding my hand and not trusting my word, or not giving me space to consider particular options. And I, in fact, to be honest, when I talk to fresh grads and people just coming out of school, I think they don't really understand how critical it is that they have a sense of autonomy for the things that they're building. I said in my introduction, no, I actually shared this on another forum, I think TikTok recently. I was kind of realizing that software development is sometimes, it works like this. You build an application, and users, consumers or customers receive the application, and they go off thinking, okay, I have the thing, this output is it. When really, the output is the result of work that was done. And the work that was done was code that was written. And the code was written by developers. And developers were given space to do that by some sort of management or leadership team. So that idea that developers need autonomy, they need to have a sense of destiny and purpose, is critical, and good leadership facilitates that. Of course, if I said to my manager, I lost all the work, and my manager then said, well, I guess we're going to cancel the trip. He didn't give me space to kind of think about it, and then jumped ahead perhaps to step into the wrong perspective. You might have trouble. That particular story is the response of the manager in this story is very true to life for me. It wasn't a manager stepping in to control things and take over. Instead, we explored options together, and essentially one of the remarkable things was when I said back then I could do this over, and I know I didn't. I'm still struggling to manifest this one. My manager said, I'll stay here, we'll work through this. So I was up until pretty late in the night. I don't want to say all night, maybe 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, recreating it. My manager was in the office. We order pizza, we sit down, we do the work. And I felt that be available part is not just be available to kind of give advice, to be the ideas person, but just to be present. I didn't need to reach out for any guidance or here's how to use it. I was leading the technology, and yet that presence was there. It's so human, and yet it provided for me an example, a template, a way to think about how to be there for your team. Beyond that, of course, the ability to allow people to be cross-functional. I heard in the previous presentation, I don't remember her name, LaShawn was saying, sometimes we find ourselves in the role of onboarding a customer, guiding them towards a solution we built. I'm sometimes wary about that, but it's good that developers play with rules. And the last point there is adapt. It's actually critical that we are extremely flexible, and that's on both sides. That's for leaders to adapt, but it's also for developers and teams to adapt as well. because things change around you. If my manager had said, well, it's 4 o'clock and you mash it up, well, there's nothing else could be done. No potential for flexibility then. We'd have a different story here. And that's what I'm looking at. The impact of that leader's choices created a space for me that didn't squelch or didn't undermine or didn't close down my budding career. Instead, almost everything that was done made for an impression on me about how to think about growing in the industry, how to understand opportunities. He didn't need to tell me, you made a mistake there. I knew I made a mistake. But how do we treat with it? How do we grow out of it? Was what was critical. And I look back at that now and I ask myself, as I ask all your leaders in the room, are we making space for and enabling our young developers to experience some of the potential for failure, some of the real failures, but also allowing them to recover and build that muscle as a result? I'm going to wrap up pretty soon, but I felt it important to underscore a thing that many of us may have heard before, that people don't leave companies, they leave bad managers. I know that might seem strange because, well, no, people looking for other opportunities, they're looking for salary improvements and all that stuff. But this is some of the data that is attached to that. Employees engage your team and your firm largely because of what managers say or do not say or do not do. This for me is, as much as I may have had many opportunities to lead and grow into leadership / management, I would be the first to admit I wasn't that aware of how important some of these things are. I kind of took it for granted, which is why I really call this observations, not these are not principles and here's what I think you should do, so on. So it's really somewhat coming to a realization that I think for the next piece of my career, and I suspect for many of us, being extremely deliberate about creating an environment for people to grow is much different than finding hard problems for people to solve or giving them a really good computer. So there are some things we consider to be table stakes: good working environment, open communication. But there's more. There's deliberately finding space for your team to be recognized when the work is done. There is going out of your way. There's a story in the Bible. Of a shepherd having 100 sheep and one going missing, and he goes off to find the one, leaving the 99 wherever they were in whatever. I don't know anything about sheep, but and that idea of ensuring your whole team is covered. It's extremely important to be deliberate about that. And at that point, and styles, my one style, to be honest, is being very open with my team and managing what that openness looks like. But certainly bringing our own sense of experience and things that ground us and make us have a sense of identity as leaders do affect whether employees trust us and are willing to work with us. And that last one, honestly, I think that's the one I may have done fairly okay at, which is providing space for people to grow. Not just growing their titles, but opportunities to enhance how they work, what they work on, things like that. But there's a limit to that, which is business. And so that one on career development may be surprising as to understand where it comes from. You can't just throw hard problems at the engineers and say, oh, that is what will justify or manifest career growth. Increasingly, leadership in the software space around facilitating developer growth and career growth means you are helping them come to alignment with the goals of a company or the goals of a customer. Again, this is what I have seen. This is what I have stories that inform and tell me, yes, growth happened because the business grew and developers were able to respond to the needs of the business, and there was a virtuous cycle there. The more the business grew, the more developers responded, and the more solutions were built, the more products were built, and projects were brought home. So I think that's the end for me. I'm open to feedback, and certainly was very happy to share some of these observations. Nicholas?
Excellent talk. Thank you so much for that, Erwin. And I totally agree with that sentiment where, yeah, I think people mostly leave their jobs because they want to escape that environment, whatever culture issues they may have or they would have faced. And something, there's really something to be said about being surrounded by people who you really feel like you can trust and have your back. And I think that's how the opposite works. Like you really get loyalty if there's a good culture and good leadership. So I wonder if you would just speak about that. If there are people who find sometimes they hear these complaints that oh nobody wants to work, nobody is coming with that passion and zeal, and maybe that might have to do something to do with their leadership style.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if everyone ever seen, there's a survey that came out maybe last week, a Stanford survey. And the critical thing is it was for the companies that were engaged. I hope I'm getting it right. 9.5% of the developers monitored were found to be ghost developers. They're doing little to no work. And it created that kind of, it was focused on places in the States. So it created that kind of further, you can hear the implied justification for some of the layoffs you hear coming up from those big companies. But I kind of, when I heard that, I immediately felt a sense of one of the things that, as you mentioned, loyalty. I think good leaders create a space to protect their developers almost, protect their team. So leadership is not the same as management. Let me hasten to add that. And I should have said that before. Management is related to clear set of company goals that you put processes in place for to accomplish. Leadership is dynamic in that you don't need to have a title to be a leader. You need to be called a official leader, so on, so to lead your team. And very effective leadership really means everyone in the team feels empowered to accomplish the same goals. And with humans, as opposed to say AI, humans have this thing called the agency. This thing that, to the point on passion, a kind of a drive, an intentionality. I want to succeed. I want this thing to go well. So I wouldn't just think in the linear fashion or the historical fashion of what was successful. I would look at what's in front of me and create potential avenues for further success. But that's the thing that drives that willingness to be successful, that essentially leadership potential, is a sense that success will benefit your team, will benefit you. The goals you accomplish are related to your own goals, and you found alignment with the company's goals. So critically, when going back to that survey result of the 9.5% ghost developers, you have to ask, where was their leadership? Where was their management? What's going on in the company such that developers essentially hiding out and doing nothing? Why would a developer want to do that? Why would you, as a developer, want to waste your most productive time simply collecting a paycheck? Now, many would say, well, again, a paycheck, so that's good enough. That's extremely risky. Really and truly, you want to build your career. I like how we see these days on TikTok, I built my FYP brick by brick. You're going to build your career brick by brick, project by project, line of code by line of code. And so if you find yourself where your lines of code aren't really relevant to the success of the company's mission, find something else to do quick, because you will actually find that you've unworked yourself out of a job. But I don't want to focus on that, because that puts a lot of the burden on the developer. Really and truly, if you find yourself in a place where your code isn't hitting the mark and they're not using your code at all, using your solutions at all, deliberately go into your manager's office like the character in the story did, with that look in your face and say, hey, where will I add value? But where would I increase our likelihood of success? I'm good at these things, maybe I need to be good at some other things. Let me know so that we could be on the same page.
Uh, yeah, definitely. I think that's a really interesting point. Many people look for these other ways. We both on LinkedIn. The typical "I'm proud to announce" these new certificates, these kind of things they want to add up. onto their portfolio to kind of get that promotion. But I think coming to the leadership or the management, like you said, and approaching them and saying, I just want to deliver more value. How can I do that? Might be a really good strategy to do so. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, for me in my career, I think that's some of what I did. It was proactive. There were some failures. I wouldn't, don't hear me saying I used to go to my managers every 2 months and say, hey, how can I add value? That's being a bit reductive. I would build prototypes and say, hey, I built this prototype. What do you think about it? I would pull together some developers and question some choices we made in a positive way, where that is full of mutual respect, and use those sessions to discover better practices. And of course, the thing here is not just you want to be a star in your organization, and so you alone going to shine. You really, as you do that, you actually create a positive pressure that causes your team to ask similar questions. And so all of you are striving towards, can we hit the mark and add more value? Most of the success stories I've been participant inside of did have a strong component of humans who ran after the target in a way that could not be expressed in the paper. It couldn't be expressed in the user story. It couldn't be expressed in the PBI. It was expressed in the in-between spaces of understanding what really is being sought after here.
Great, great. And I was just thinking sometimes there's a lot of debate in community whether, having that idea of a non-technical manager, somebody who's giving you deadlines and kind of managing you, but may not be intimately acquainted with some of the technical details you're dealing with. I wonder, what is your thoughts on that? Acknowledging in your presentation, what's her name? What was the manager name?
Gail.
Gail. I could see that she didn't particularly have to be technical. She was there to facilitate and be
Right.
present. So I wonder what's your thoughts on the technical lead? Should these be two different people, or it's more just on the relationship there?
That's a really, really good question. I've two slightly disagreeable answers. One is, if you're building something, anything, right, and the persons who are responsible for managing the process don't have a deep appreciation for how the challenges of building that thing, you could find it more difficult to arrive at alignment. That doesn't just apply to software, it applies to most fields. Unfortunately, sometimes you just don't have the resources available to do that. You just don't have enough people who have that skill, who are willing, because management in that context is different from technical execution. So the person who you have selected to be the manager, it shouldn't be expected that that person is writing a bunch of code and pushing things to production. Maybe they have in the past, but for the minute, what they're doing is help guide this thing by treating with all the issues that could relate to the development of the solution that go beyond the lines of code being written. Hear what I'm not saying. In one scenario, in one context, it's somebody who has technical experience helping guide a technical team. And it's not so much guide like they're telling them what to do. The lead developer, the person writing the most code, the senior professional, that person is still responsible for driving this thing, adding the most volume of code, being excellent. What the manager comes in to do is be that, in some scenarios, be that blocker to a bunch of external influence, a bunch of questions coming about when we're going to finish, why taking so long, this thing really easy, let me add this new feature, scope creep, all that kind of stuff, in addition to finances and things like that. Sometimes though, eventually, in fact, you do get to the point where the person above you is non-technical. And so either you have it earlier in your career, and what both parties need to understand is a lot of communication is necessary. In fact, that's probably a simple way to look at it. The less technical history your manager has, the more you may need to communicate with that person to make sure you're well aligned. That may turn out to be a good thing, because sometimes our developers haven't developed the communication muscle, willingness to talk and explain things and reason. And you find yourself in problems because people do get where you're coming from or why you're making particular choices. I'll share one story that I think drives this home. One time, this is pretty advanced in my career. I'm leading a team and I'm the subject matter expert for a particular platform. My non-technical manager turns up to me and says, "Hey, I think we may have a problem with this thing. It's a critical problem." So the dude says this to me, and I'm sorry to say, the first response I had was, "Nice, nice." That's the first thing I said. And of course, the non-technical manager was not pleased, to say the least. He's like, "How you mean nice?" But it was because for me, I'm not working. How that could not be working? Like my initial response was, there's a hard problem to solve. And I kind of immediately was like willing to gravitate towards it and have fun with it. But I needed to also realize the person I'm talking to don't want to hear nice when there's a massive problem. They actually want to hear, all right, we have the capacity to fix it and resolve this, and I think we'll resolve it in XY period of time. So figuring that out, understanding that is why it's important really to understand how to communicate with different kinds of managers depending on their skill level. It also means the managers and the company leadership may need to spend more time reasoning about what is trying to be accomplished. So there's responsibilities on both sides. And I think that's one of the driving points of this particular segment I wanted to share, that there is a responsibility to think about what developer leadership means for your firm and how the things that you will specifically do to enable a higher likelihood of success for your projects.
All right, thank you so much for that, Erwin. Your talks are always really engaging and really fun. Thanks again for being part of the DevFest this year. Any final thoughts you would like to share with our budding developers?
Primarily that groups like this are critical. This is Google Developer Group, run by the founders in this particular event. UE at one time had code jammers. I don't know if they still have it, but it's really, really important that you find squads to build things with. And it's kind of regardless of where you're in your career. Once you are building, once you are looking to create new things, there's a skill that comes from finding a squad and doing it together with them. So that I'm hopeful that just the fact that Mendes and team have pulled this together again for another year, it gives me hope. I saw some new faces. I'm really, really happy to see that, and looking forward to more meetups. Let's have 4 of these in the year. Let's have a Google Developer one and a Python one and a AI one, and let's just meet and find ways to get the community aware of who we are and use that to achieve goals.